We have two headwinds, two of the biggest ones. One is workforce. We feel it across the country. And it all stems from the fact that we're not giving birth to enough people, right? I mean, when I grew up, it was population explosion. China had to mandate one child per family. I mean, we were worried about the Earth's resources. And here we are, now we're a shrinking economy. And we've really got to figure out how we can take care of this population that was exploding. Now is going to be needing care.
Bob, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear about how you got into the space. I know there was one very personal story of how you started the company
right.
that you run today. So I'd love for you to kick that off.
So, I mean, my story is not that different from most people, especially here in this country, where, you have a loved one that all of a sudden becomes ill. And for me, it was my mother. At 48 years old, January 2nd, she had a massive heart attack. I was a young, new corporate guy working for the Quaker Oats company. I'd been with them for about 6, maybe 7 months. And that heart attack changed all of our world. My brothers, my dad. She spent 2 months in the hospital, 18 days in a drug-induced coma, and came out a very different person. Only 1/3 of her heart was still working. The fortunate thing was she lived for almost 18 years, and my brothers and I were caregivers for her. The biggest challenge we had was not only just her heart, but because she suffered a series of heart attacks, she had oxygen deprivation to her brain, so she had small cognitive deficits. She had short-term memory issues, those things that come along with that. 1985, there was no such thing as assisted living. 1985, there was no such thing as, I like to call it in-home supportive care, which, some call it non-medical, non-clinical, non-skilled, private duty. It doesn't really describe what it is. It tells the world what you're not. It doesn't tell the world what you are. So in-home supportive care companies like ours, or big franchises like Right at Home and Home Instead, didn't exist then. It's crazy how this population has aged so quickly. But going back to my story, my parents moved to Arizona in 1987 because the climate was better. And my brothers and I, we descended to visit mom and visit my father. We were from Baltimore, Maryland. And, look, you live out here in California. I was living in California before I ended up moving. But at the time, I was living up in New England, and I lived all over working for Quaker and Gatorade. Those were great consumer product experiences. And then I went to go work for Dole Foods, which used to be a Bay company. And,
oh, yeah?
And then moved down to Southern California. So mom and dad moved. We vacationed a lot. And all our Thanksgivings were in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we would come multiple times during the year to spend time. And we loved it out here. And I say out here, but out there. We really loved that experience. And my brothers and I decided we should move there, because mom's health wasn't great. And we stood up a home care company to care for other people's moms and dads in the way we did. That was in 1994. My brother Joe ran it for just a little north of 9 years. And I came in 2003 when he decided to make a career move. I wasn't planning on it. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I had a 15-year consumer product goods career. I mentioned Quaker Oats. I ran the Gatorade brand in the Northeast for a good 5 years. That was a lot of fun. It really was. And then I worked on Dole Foods. I ran a frozen dessert company for a little while in Scottsdale, Arizona. And then this came up, and I never thought it would be me. My wife and my dad convinced me and said, hey, you'd be really good at this. And here it is 21 years later. I love what I do. We're making differences in lives every single day. Not just the lives of the clients we're serving, but the caregivers who do the work. I mean, their lives change overnight. It's really a beautiful thing that we do.
Incredible story. What I'm curious about is in the early days, and even though you weren't officially involved, I'm sure you were closely following, and then you took over. What were some of the early challenges, and how did you get over them or get across them? And what continues to be top of mind for you today?
So I think one of the biggest challenges we run into is the fact that people don't know that this exists. Home care. They really don't. I mean, they think that home health and home care are the same, and they're so different. And just how they're different is, home health is an episodic visit. You're visiting a clinician, a therapist, a CNA, whoever's coming in is coming in for a visit that could be 45 minutes to an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And then they go. Home care is very personal. I mean, we help with activities of daily living, right? So those activities could be just getting up in the morning, meal preparation and eating the meals, taking your medications, showering and bathing, and certainly companionship and driving them to their appointments. And certainly making sure they take their medications in the right doses at the right time. I mean, people say, and you and I talked about this earlier, they call it non-medical. It is very medical. I mean, if we don't keep people clean, cared for, comfortable, safe, and in their home, they're going to find themselves in the ER. So there's a really important things. So I think, for me, I don't think people really know that home care exists. And, I give so much credit to all those major franchisors out there. And all of them are friends of mine. I've served on multiple boards. And I will tell you, thank you, Visiting Angels. Thank you, Home Instead. Thank you, Bright Star. Thank you, all of you that run these commercials, because it shows consumers that there's an option. You don't have to go into an assisted living. You don't have to go into skilled nursing. You can get care in the home. And I think as much of a challenge as it was back in 1994 and 1995, it's still a challenge today. And we're still somewhat new. I mean, I talked to you about 1985, right? So all those companies I was talking about didn't emerge until the 90s. So there's a reason, and I can get into the facts why that happened if you like.
Yeah, I think what I'm interested in is how has the industry changed over the last, call it 10, 15, 20 years, right? Going from, these companies didn't exist to now getting it out so people actually understand, that this is an option and they should consider it. And what do you see moving forward, right? Like, where is this going as well?
So I think it goes back to really doing the math, right? We have 345 million Americans that live in this country. And in order to sustain our population, every child-rearing female needs to have 2.1 children. And we're at 1.63 and declining. We know the 65-year-old population is going to double between now and 2050. And we know that the 85-year-old population is going to nearly quadruple. So the stress that it's going to put on our society is going to be huge, absolutely huge. And we're not going to have more babies. It's a fact. I mean, women are waiting longer, and many of them are choosing to not have children. And until we figure out how to grow babies outside the womb, which isn't going to happen in my lifetime, I don't know how we sustain that. So for us, we have to make home the center of care. And we're doing that. I mean, what's happened over the last, we'll call it 10 years, is hospital at home is happening. And people are getting diagnostic testing at home. They're getting physician visits at home. They're getting nurses visiting at home. They're getting everything in the home. So we have to be thinking about that. Technology's played a big role in this, okay? So we all have heard in the healthcare field about remote patient monitoring, and people call it RPMs. We've been doing it for a long time, but the equipment is getting so much more sophisticated today. We don't have to wear stuff now. We can have ambient stuff in the home, like some of the stuff that you were talking about, what you do in your business. Yep. We can ambient things in the home that can measure respirations, can measure blood pressure. I mean, it's fascinating what we can do. The Apple Watch is even really cool. So the tech piece has got to be part of it.
Yeah.
But the other part we have to really understand is that the world we live in, when it comes to people, is we're relational. Hirsch, babies get touched over 100 times a day. We have 1/3 of our population, 65 and older, solo aging. They may not get touched once a week, let alone once a month. We crave that. We need that hand holding, the handshake, the pat on the shoulder, the hug. That's a very human experience. So all the tech that we're talking about is going to help us have more human experiences, but we can't replace that human experience with robots and tech. That I don't see ever happening.
I think that's really, really interesting. What are some of the initiatives that you focused on at Cypress, over the last couple of years, or even that you're focused on right now, that help solve for this? Maybe we can talk about the personal side, and then we can speak about the technology side.
So, on the personal side, it's been hard. We have two headwinds, two of the biggest ones. One is workforce. We feel it across the country. Mm-hmm. And it all stems from the fact that we're not giving birth to enough people, right? When I grew up, it was population explosion. China had to mandate one child per family. We were worried about the Earth's resources. And here we are, now we're a shrinking economy, and we've really got to figure out how we can take care of this population that was exploding. Now is going to be needing care. So caregivers is really a big challenge. Immigration shouldn't be a dirty word. And, I am with my colleagues. We're all part of a couple of the trade associations that are lobbying in my state, as well as at the Washington, D.C., to really help them understand this. I'd love to see some more visas from very caring nations out there that want to come here. So I would love to see that change. But I think, we can do a lot more on the caregiving front, and I want to hold that tab down. But the other real big headwind is cost. The cost of our services for private care has gone up almost 50% in 5 years. And consumers don't have that much money. So that is a big headwind for us. So we got to figure out, and what Cypress is doing, we have to reimagine care, right? We have to figure out how to do it, because there's only 4 payer sources. It's private funds, long-term care insurance, Medicaid, and VA benefits. And to qualify for Medicaid and VA is very difficult. And, long-term care insurance, less than 10% of the population did that. So it's private funds. And we now call it family funds. But at Cypress, you asked what we're doing. So one of the things we embarked on almost a couple of years ago is we embarked on fractionalized care, because $40 an hour is really expensive. And I know we're here in the Bay Area, it's probably close to $50 to $60 an hour, because the biggest problem we have is that our caregivers don't live where our clients do. And I got to tell you, getting from San Jose Airport to here, on the map, it looks really close. But the traffic that we ran into was really incredible. So, imagine caregivers living an hour and a half away. The traffic that they have to maintain. So how do you give those caregivers enough hours to make it worth it? And we could have a whole discussion about low-income housing, and we could talk about that another time. And that's where the caregivers would live. But how do we make that work? So at Cypress, what we're doing is fractionalized care. We're doing care by the minute. We never used to be able to work in these communities, because we used to take the square peg and push it down this round hole. We said, hey, in order for you to get care in your community, you need to give us 4 hours. Well, they only needed someone to get them up in the morning, or they needed someone to get them down to the dining room, or they needed someone just to do a standby assist in the community. And by the way, in the community setting, assisted living and independent living, 70% are solo aging. 70%. And hygiene's a big challenge, because these older adults are afraid to take a shower. They're afraid to take a shower and be alone. God forbid I fall. So we're reimagining it. We got a 4th community coming up, and we start off with minimums of an hour. And as we build critical mass, we can get it down to the minute. But it really takes, and to make it work, it takes buy-in from the leadership, the executive director, all the way down to housekeeping. Because if you don't have buy-in by everybody, you still have a challenge. And that challenge, just so you know, those communities, for the most part, are littered with independent contractors. And those executive directors of those big communities, whether it be Brookdale's or the little ones, they got liability. I had one executive director who we ended up partnering with. I asked him, I said, what keeps you up at night? He says, all those caregivers, I have no idea who's roaming my building with these vulnerable adults. So I think the world we need to really think about is fractionalized care, shared care, these naturally occurring retirement communities. When you see an aging population like we have, we got to figure out how to provide care. There are other things that we can talk about, but I think that's a big part of it. And that's where Cypress, I think, will evolve to. And
Yeah.
Healthcare will evolve too.
Yeah. And to get a market up, you have to, you mentioned you have to staff it up. You have to make sure there's critical demand. You have to make, it's almost like this supply demand problem that you're solving, right? To be able to offer it. How long does it take to get a market up to be able to support this fractionalized?
So in the community itself, it could take up to a year, and you got to be willing to invest that. Trust me, we made a few mistakes. We paid some stupid taxes, and we learned. I mean, we want to fail fast, learn, and then move on. So one of the things we learned is that very first caregiver you have to have someone that's presentable, and you have to have somebody that can also be extroverted and kind of marketing, because you want them to connect with all of the residents and say, do you need some help? I'm happy to come help you, get a shower or get dressed in the morning, or making sure you take your medications or drive you to dialysis or to chemotherapy. I mean, it's just those little bits. And the reason why it's really good for home care companies like me is that we don't really make that much money on fractionalized care. We really don't. I mean, we charge about $1 a minute, right? So it's either $40 an hour. If you get an hour of fractionalized care, it's $60 an hour. But the true benefit is we've built a relationship, and the relationship is everything, right? It's that trust that you have, that familiarity. So once we build that relationship, we know the aging continuum takes people down. I mean, illnesses happen, injuries happen. And when they need more care, who are they going to call? They're going to call us.
Right.
So again, I just step back, and whoever's watching and listening to this, we should be almost daily taking a look introspectively at the way we're delivering care, and deliver it differently. Deliver it in ways that we know consumers can consume it. So I'm excited about the future. I think it's great just from the number standpoint. Yeah. It's just that if we stay the way we are, we stay static, and if we're not dynamic, we're going to be obsolete.
Yeah. And then what about so that was the first part on the personal side. I'm curious about, on the technology side, what you've implemented or what you're excited to implement that really elevates that care and helps differentiate some of your offering.
So we talked briefly before we sat down. So I had a partnership with a San Francisco-based company called Honor. Honor bought Home Instead, and Honor really was a tech-forward company. And while I didn't see behind the scenes, I knew they were using a lot of machine learning to do redundant, repetitive tasks. So my agreement with them ended in February of 24, and I had to take back my operations. The best thing that happened to me, Hirsch, was the fact that I wasn't married to the stuff I was doing prior, back in 2019 and before. I had a clean slate. I knew I needed to reimagine care and do it differently. So, I'm a believer that in order to innovate, you have to collaborate. I mean, you're a small little company. How much tech and innovation do you have? But there are others that are doing those types of things. So I've collaborated with 2 partners, using a lot of machine learning, still using the job posting board company that I used to use. But with the machine learning, those job postings change multiple times a week through AI bots. And the reason why we do that is because when you post a job, it's got to be fresh. If it's static, it drops down to the bottom. So you got to, reword it, repost it so it goes back up at the top. So we do that. I have machine learning going through all the applicants and kicking out all the ones that are duplicates, all the ones that are out of the geography, all the ones that don't have the right skill sets. And then it punts it over and everything's white labeled under my company's name, Cypress HomeCare Solutions. It goes over to a Calendly type account, and you can make your first interview appointment.
Wow.
And that interview appointment is a digital interview with one of my employees, not a third-party AI agent or a virtual agent. It's my person that's doing the interview. And we ask one question. We say, what's your why? Why caregiving? We want to see their face. We want to hear them speak. We want to make sure that there's no, massive tattoos and piercings all over their face, because people are, paying a lot of money for this, and we don't want scary looking people. Not to say they are bad people, but people sometimes judge people by their cover, what they look like. The other part is we want to hear them speak. They have to be able to speak English. Our clients, 99.99%, English speaking. So we need to make sure we have someone that can speak. If you get past that, and by the way, every one of those encounters is transcribed, it's summarized, and it's scored. And my collaborator connected to my enterprise software solution. So it populates a caregiver profile that's inactive. If you get past that and you get invited to the second interview, you're asked to produce a lot of credentialing documents. Every single one of them has it in their phone. So what do? They are instructed through text or email to push that stuff up. And when they get to 80% pushed up, they get invited to a second interview. Now that second interview comes through to my HR manager, and we are very intentional. We're asking very specific questions about their experience, what days you're available, what type of client do you want? Are you allergic to cats and dogs? Do you want to be around smokers? All of those questions come out. Every one of those is transcribed, summarized, and scored, and goes right over to the caregiver inactive profile. If you get past that, then you get invited to an orientation. And that orientation is in person. That orientation is with my HR manager and my scheduler. Now, I know home care might be new to you, but the scheduler is the most important position in the company. The scheduler is the one that talks to the client. The scheduler is the one that talks to the family. The scheduler is the one that if somebody calls off, they're the ones that discover the caregiver. And if they don't have a relationship with them, if they don't know who they are, especially being a new one, then they're just looking at a picture and they're looking at a description and they don't really have what is necessary to make that recommendation. I mean, because we're constantly selling. And I don't mean selling our services, but selling a individual, a caregiver, saying, look, I have Abby. She's amazing. She's new with us, but she's got 20 years of experience. I met her the other day. I've been looking for someone to replace Leah, and I think Abby's going to be the perfect person. So going through that, it's a 4-phase interviewing process that I can get people hired in 3 to 4 days, where in the old world that I was in, it was a 4-phase interviewing process. Phone call. It was coming into the office to visit. It was scanning documents, sending out for information, and then having them come on orientation. It could take 3 weeks to bring someone aboard. It literally, 90% of my workforce in every home care company's workforce, those caregivers are living paycheck to paycheck. So if you can't get them through that funnel, that recruitment funnel traditionally is full of friction. If we can smooth that out and get them through to the other side, that is key. So technology too, part 2, what we introduced back about 9-10 months ago is all inbound calls. Every single inbound call that we take in is transcribed and it's summarized, and it is populated into my enterprise software solution. So if it's a prospective client, it goes into the lead bucket. If it's a current client, you already know it because you know the phone number, and whatever's happening with that client populates into the client profile. If it's a caregiver or a prospective caregiver, same type of thing. So all outbound calls, all inbound calls are transcribed and summarized. We just introduced about 90 days ago, and I know this is something that you do in your profession, is we're doing ambient listening in our encounters in the home. So what we're doing is we're doing our home safety evaluation. We're pulling the care plans together, and we ask the client before. We say, we'd like to record this encounter. In Arizona, it only needs to be one way, but I want to be respectful, and I don't want to record something without their permission. And then when we turn it on, we ask again. We want to make sure you've given us permission to record this. We're recording it for documentation, for developing the care plan. And my nephew, who is the engineer right here in San Francisco, has figured out how to connect it all to the enterprise software solution. So the care plan is actually existing in there and is filling into the right boxes. So I've been really amazed. And for us, if we can do a lot of the redundant and repetitive tasks with machines and AI, we can be more relational with our caregivers. We can be more relational with our clients and their families. I mean, they're going through a journey like no other, and we get to be part of that final journey. They allow us to be part of that chapter. We need to make it the best it can be. So how have I adopted technology? We've done it that way, but we're also using ambient, listening devices in the home as well. So we have a partnership with a collaborator called Sensi, and it's auditory technology using AI, and it's discerning changes in patterns. And we can discern a change in someone's gait. We can discern when someone falls. I mean, our whole goal is to provide protection and predicting. So if we can predict and protect our clients and keep them out of the ER or urgent care, it's going to be a much more pleasant experience for them. They can live their best lives. And even for us as home care agencies, we get to keep them as clients so that they don't go into a skilled nursing facility or don't discharge over to heaven. I know it's a long answer, but those are some of the things we're doing on the tech and innovation side.
It seems to me like it's not only technology, but it's processes that you've really defined, and it's great operations as well, right? And you combine all of them together to talk about what you did. So I appreciate you going into that, and just incredible use cases across the board. The other thing I think is interesting, and I think any great company needs a rock solid recruiting function. And so I think it's incredible. You've got that down from 3 to 4 weeks to 4 days.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're going to continue to bring that down, especially as you become more supply constrained, right? With all this demand that you spoke about earlier.
And the other thing I didn't share is that we're paying some of the highest rates. I don't want to mess around. I want the best of the best, and I won't settle for mediocrity. My daughters, I have 3 daughters. 2 of them are in the healthcare space. One's a nurse, a labor and delivery nurse at Cedars-Sinai. Going back to the math that I was sharing with you, she says the average woman delivering a baby is about 38 years old. How that has changed in the last 25 years. It's crazy. And because I can tell you, we were having babies in our 20s, but now people are waiting longer. And my other daughter works in speech therapy, and my last daughter's a political journalist. She's my oldest daughter, but they all worked in my business. When they were off in school and high school, I had them working in the business. So I make it really clear, especially when it comes to sending caregivers into people's homes. Is this a place where I would want to send my daughter? Would you want to send my daughter there? So, I mean, caregivers are so important. They're the lifeline to us. It's the only asset we have. I can get out there and do these types of podcasts. I can get out there and meet with, big influencers. But if I can't deliver the care, where am I? So we have to hire the best. And I used to train caregivers in my new model, my 2.0 version. Since my post-honor era, I require experienced caregivers and advanced trained caregivers. That's what I need. I need caregivers that have experience in dementia and Alzheimer's, end of life, working with neuromuscular disorders like Parkinson's. Those are the caregivers I need, and I need to place them on the clients that need that kind of care.
That makes a lot of sense. One thing I love asking, and I'm sure you're going to have a great perspective here, is telling us about some stories of experiences that either the caregivers have had or the folks that you work with that are getting the care have had, where you look at it and you think, wow, that really made a difference. If you're willing to, maybe sharing 1 or 2 stories there would be really powerful. Well,
I mean, look, there are a lot of stories. There's one that, I recall, and I won't mention names, although she's up on my website. So, I mean, could, but she was a Holocaust survivor, and, she wanted to live at home. And, we gave her that opportunity to do so. And it was a great experience because the family trusted us and trusted me. And I got invited into this intervention. It was really weird. I'm sitting in their living room and all the children are there. And, one of the son-in-laws was there. And they were all telling her and me, they invited me in, why she needed to move. And then they asked me, said, Bob, so what do you think? And I looked over to their mother and I said, so what do you think? Do you want to go? She goes, no, I want to stay here. And I said, why? And she told us why. She goes, I love the privacy. I love that I can invite people in for tea. Your caregivers are here to get me up in the morning. They can help me prepare the tea. I can remain independent. Now, she was a very somewhat famous person, and they wanted her to move into this community. And eventually she did. She did about 2.5 years later, but she did it on her terms, not on their terms. And I think that's the thing I love about the work we do, is that as much as we're helping the families out, we're also listening to the clients. And she wanted to stay home, and that's where she was going to thrive. And we gave her that ability to stay at home. And then it was her turn to say, you know what? It's time. I should be going into a facility. It's getting harder for me. So, for me, that's just one of the stories, but there's so many others that, I can't think of them all on the spot here, but, I love that when I go in to do a home safety evaluation and develop a care plan, and you're approached by one or usually two individuals that are like this. And the reason why they're like that, Hirsch, is first of all, I grew up in an era that it was a rite of passage to go get your driver's license. And everyone in my year went on their birthday to go get it. And it's crazy today. The youth today, I think it's like 40% don't get their license. They don't really care. And you got Uber, you got Waymo, you got all these other ways to transport, or you got someone that can give you a ride. But this generation we're caring for is mine. And that was a big deal. So the hardest thing for families to do is to tell mom or dad you can't drive anymore. Sorry, the insurance is getting really high. We keep getting the car fixed, and you had that accident. That's hard because you've taken their independence away. You know what's harder? Is to tell someone you can't live alone anymore. You need somebody to come and help you. Man, I am independent. I've always been independent. I do all my own stuff. And now I'm being told that someone needs to come in. I'm going to be like this and say, I know Kevin wants me to get care, but Hilda and I are just fine. We've been doing it really well for the last 70 years. We don't need your help. But the coolest thing is when we say, look, give it a try. Matter of fact, as the owner, oftentimes I'll say, look, if you don't like it, you won't have to pay for it. But give us a try. Kevin has your best interest at heart. He's worried. He's worried about a fall. We can help. And invariably, that magic happens. It's humans, right? It's not technology. It's the relationship we happen. And it's really special. I mean, Hirsch, one of the things that I love, and I love it when the clients and our caregivers get really close, where the client starts really caring about the caregiver. Now, we're really careful about caregivers sharing personal stuff because everyone has a story. And, we're like, the client is our priority. We don't want the client to know anything about your life. We want you to be there for them, asking questions about them. But they become dependent. And I will tell you, I got into this world or this industry through my mom, but I had the pleasure of using Cypress to care for my stepmom because my dad remarried after my mom passed. And then shortly after, almost a year and a half later, my dad. And I got to see that firsthand. And I can tell you my dad, who passed away almost 3 years ago, and it's still pretty sharp. I mean, we were really close. We had a nursing student. His name was Bryant. And he went to ASU. And he was from Georgia. And Brian, if you're watching this, you were amazing. You really are. You're a part of our family. He got so close with my dad. So close that I used to get kind of, jealous because I know my dad was telling things to him that he wasn't telling me. And I also got a little worried that, they were not really behaving when it came to food. It's like dad became a brittle diabetic, was just a diabetic before. But, they would go places. And I'm like, where'd you go? Barbecue? Are you kidding me? But you know what? At the same time, I give him a hard time, but I knew it made dad happy. And the two of them were as thick as thieves. And I think every family that goes through this will tell you that if they've gotten caregivers, how close they've gotten with those caregivers. They become part of the family. And that's what's a beautiful thing. And I got to see that firsthand as an adult child who was receiving care for his dad by my employee. You know what the best part of it was, Hirsch? Is my dad promised that he was going to go to his graduation. He died definitely sooner than all of us thought he was going to. CHF, congestive heart failure can go really fast. And it went really fast for him. And, Bryant was in a relationship too, and he was talking about going to his wedding. So when he graduated the year after, I got the invitation, and my wife and I went. And it was really special because I knew how close they were. And I'll tell you, afterwards, I flagged him down. And I do a lot of work with ASU School of Nursing. So I want you to know, I know a lot of the professors over there, and I'm on the advisory council for their HEAL lab, which is their healthcare entrepreneur accelerator lab. We help these kids with ideation, bring stuff to the marketplace, which is really, really cool. I digress. But going back to talking about Bryant. So we're outside the hall, and I get to meet his parents. And he goes, I want to show you something. And he unzips his robe. And he says, see this tie? This is your dad's tie. And then he goes, I want to show you something else. And he rolled up his sleeve, and he had the monogram shirt of my dad's.
Wow.
And he said, your dad meant a lot to me. And, I wore this for him. And you can't help but get emotional. I mean, it's really beautiful what these caregivers do. And, that will always be leaving a lasting impression on me.
Well, thank you so much for telling us that story.
Yeah.
And you can feel the emotion in the story as well. And thank you for telling that to us. And
well, you're welcome.
It goes to show, and maybe I didn't even realize the impact that caregivers can have, right? And if you haven't been in the space, and that's why I think it's a good platform for people to understand what caregivers can do. It's so personal.
It really is. And for me, Hirsch, I think, my generation is not going to accept caregivers. And we find we're getting more baby boomers as clients. And we find that when we describe care as having a personal assistant versus having a caregiver, that personal assistant, Dad, is going to help you open up your mail. It's going to help you get over to, the gym that you go to. You've got somebody that can help do the laundry. When you phrase it that way, I think it has a more positive spin, because I know, even though I run a home care company and I've been running it for 21 years, when it comes to my time, I'm going to be fighting. I mean, remember that independence? We've been here. I've been doing just fine. There's something that happens to everyone when they have a diagnosis. I just wrote a column about it. And that is, denial is not a strategy. And people want to deny, and they just want to forget about it, and they don't want to talk about it. But if you have a movement disorder, you need to go to physical therapy. There are things you can do to not cure, but to delay onset so you can have better days, and you can avoid going onto a walker. Most importantly, avoiding a fall.
I want to get, because you brought up a point. You do a lot of work with ASU, and I know you also have this idea of these training programs that you've built, right? I know we haven't touched on that yet, but would love for you to speak a little bit about that as well.
So, I mean, the training programs, we used to have a training lab. So we're known to have training. And, everything's changed since COVID. It really has. And part of the reason why I talked to you about the recruitment piece to our innovation and using, tech and artificial intelligence is that people weren't coming to us anymore. And we were going to them, and I don't know what's going on with this generation. And I'm not here to, say a whole lot of disparaging remarks, but ghosting, I just don't get that. When you text somebody and you say, we'll see you at 8:00 tomorrow morning, and then you text them at 7 a.m. and say, we're on our way. And then you get there and they're not there. So, for me, the training lab, even though I disbanded it or took it apart when I did the Honor partnership, I partnered with a company called Navan. They are a New York and Toronto based company, and they do online educational learning. And it is really fascinating. It's all through devices, and you can get it in small bites. You can get it in larger bites. I think online with training like that is so important, especially when you're hiring caregivers with experience like I am. One of the programs we're running, and I'm not sure you're aware of it, it's called the GUIDE program. And the GUIDE program is a program that was put together by the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid Services, where it would help families that are struggling with caring for someone with dementia and Alzheimer's, to give them respite. Now, it's not a lot of hours, but it's some hours. And, when I think about it, we have probably maybe 28 or 30 clients right now in that program. And every caregiver that we go to send out there, we send them some of the training modules so they can watch them beforehand. So I think as it relates to technology, a lot of the hands-on stuff that we used to do, now we're doing video and we're scoring, we're watching participation. We have to really, I said before, reimagine care. So we're doing training, but we're doing it in a very different way, in a different medium than we were previously.
As you look forward, and you've been with the company for almost 20 plus years now, right? Like, what keeps you going? What keeps you motivated and excited? And clearly you've done amazing work for the industry, but I'm curious, what is that next thing that you're looking forward to?
So, I don't have to tell you, you're here in the Valley, right? And I think one of the things I've learned from people that are in tech is that you're looking to solve a problem, right? What's the problem? How do we solve it? You can't be up in an ivory tower and just sit there and say, oh, I think this is a problem. No, we need to know what those problems are. And they got to be big problems. You don't want to solve small problems because you're not going to really be able to sustain yourself. You want a big problem. I'm telling you, Hirsch, there's no bigger problem than what we're experiencing right now. You got guys like Dr. Ken Dykewell. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He wrote a book called The Age Wave in 1988, 1989. He predicted this. He talked about what was going to happen based on demographics. Here we are. The government has kicked the can down the road just so far, so long. And for us, I think the biggest problem solved is, how are we going to care for this older generation? I'm not really worried about the 65-year-olds. I think I shared with you, I got a birthday tomorrow. So I'll be 63. I'm pretty close to that. But I think 65-year-olds have done a better job taking care of themselves than the last generation and the generation before. Knowledge is power. We know we need to move. We know we need to exercise. Yoga is a regular practice of mine. I try to do it at least 5 days a week. I walk my dog. I play tennis. I play golf. I'm very active. It's the 85-year-olds I'm worried about. I shared with you the data point. We're talking about almost quadrupling. So when I sit there and I think about what am I going to do, I think about Stephen Covey and his seven effective habits. Number 2 is you think about the end in mind. What do you want your epitaph to read? Well, I want mine to read that I was an amazing father, husband, I was amazing son, all of the things that we all want, that I was loving and I did some great things. But for me, I want to leave a lasting impression on this aging continuum. And I want my children and grandchildren to say, my father had something to do with this, to figure out how to solve not only the biggest problem of our generation, but I think humanity. I really do. When you think this world has not aged as much as it ever has in the past, and we just look at Japan and we look at South Korea, and there's a lot of communities that are a little bit ahead of us. In Arizona, we are too. In 2030, we're going to have more people 65 and older than we are going to have 17 and younger. And I will tell you, the United States is going to see that in 2033, 2034. So we're going to see it a little sooner because of our demographics. But that's the stuff that keeps me up at night. And, a lot of my friends are retiring, Hirsch. And I feel like, retirement is something that is not in my vernacular. I think if you have purpose, and I think it was Mark Twain that said it, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And I love what I do. And home care is 24/7. And what I love most is the fact that I can help people. And part of what I did when I joined the company in 2003 was I rebranded it. And I changed the name. Our parent company is Cypress Staffing Services. And it was that for nearly 10 years before I came on. But I changed it to Cypress HomeCare Solutions because I wanted to be a solutions-oriented company. I may not be the solution, but I want to be that Sherpa. I want to be that trusted person in my community that people can call and say, you know what, I need to see a special type of cardiologist, or I need a hospice referral, or I need an orthopedic. I've got that. I can do that. And I believe that it all comes back around. So helping people through this journey is something that I really love and my team loves. I love being a solutions-oriented company. And I think this is our time in home care. Home care has never had a better time right now because of the numbers the way they are. But I think home care companies need to reimagine the way they deliver care, because it's not sustainable when it's privately paid for. So, I mean, you're talking about $40 plus an hour. That's $350,000 a year if you're getting 24/7 care. A lot of people don't have that kind of money. I don't, after tax dollars. So we have to figure this out.
Well, first of all, happy early birthday!
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And no, I think it's inspiring to hear your approach moving forward, and I love what you said about having a purpose and moving with that purpose and being active. And I think you're right. I think the younger generation is seeing how important it is today. Even my friends and people I spend time with are, I think, just a lot more conscious about the decisions they make now.
And hopefully not smoking cigarettes, drinking too much alcohol. I'm not saying don't do all of that.
Yeah.
But I will say, I think the biggest problem we have is that Americans aren't ready for long-term care support. And let me just tell you why. It's because they have no idea how much it costs. And they all think that Medicare pays for this. I wouldn't say all. At least 50% of the people that call us think that the services that we provide are paid for by Medicare. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic here, but kids today, people in your age group and others, need to put a fund aside for long-term care supports, because guess what? This is breaking families. It's crushing families. Families can't afford this. They're not ready for this. That's why companies like mine need to figure out how to do this differently, whether it be shared care, whether it be fractionalized care, shared care in those NORCs, naturally occurring communities, retirement communities, or villages, or, maybe a Golden Girls type thing. I mean, we have to think differently. And I truly think that what's going to happen is we're going to go back to the way it was the last century. We're going to go back to the nuclear family. My mother grew up in downtown Baltimore with her aunties and her uncles and her cousins all around. And I think everybody back in the day cared for one another. They didn't need outside assistance. So I think this generational living is a big deal. I think bringing people together is a big deal. These are parts of the problem solves that I see as viable for solving one of the biggest problems of our lifetime, if not humanity.
Well, awesome, Bob. Thank you so much for the time, the thoughts, and the stories. We really appreciate it.
Well, Hirsch, I've appreciated being on, and I love what you guys are doing. So keep doing some great work. Thank you for having me.